So I love our second reading, St. Paul to the Hebrews, because he really just kind of kicks these people in the teeth when he says, brothers and sisters, it is impossible that the blood of bulls and goats take away sins. I think the equivalent of that for today would be being kind alone doesn't take away sins, or being a nice person alone doesn't take away sins, or whatever else that the secular world looks to when they're not looking to religion or faith. They look to just being a nice person, a kind person, a welcoming person, a Mr. Rogers type, as if that will be what gains us salvation. At this time, Paul is telling the Hebrews that it's not the sacrificing that takes away their sins and brings them salvation. It's following the law, and ultimately the law leads them to the Messiah. And if they recognize the Messiah, they would recognize that Christ is the Messiah. So then they would follow Christ, and that is what brings them salvation through the one sacrifice and perfect sacrifice on the cross. And so Paul is really setting the stage to help people understand how important it is that God took on a human flesh, which is what we celebrate today in the Annunciation. We also celebrate Mary's great yes, and Mary is an archetype of the church, and so we want to mimic Mary's generous heart, and also saying yes to whatever God asks of us to do with our lives. But we are also celebrating in a bigger way that Christ became flesh today, the first incarnation, if you will, of Christ coming into Mary's womb and living for the first time in human flesh, right? And it's that God becoming man that brings us salvation. Not all the sacrifices, not for us today being a nice person, right? I mean, Jesus wants us to be nice people. Jesus does not expect his disciples to be jerks, right? So we do have to be nice. But being nice alone does not gain us eternal life in heaven. Following our Lord, taking up our cross and following him, having a daily prayer life and a deep spiritual life, to come to the sacraments, especially the Eucharist and the sacrament of reconciliation, whether spiritually, virtually, or in person, to come to the living font of that wellspring, that living water. That's what gives us eternal life. You could be the nicest person in the world and reject Jesus and the truth and the church. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to heaven. We're not called to just be nice people. We're called to be disciples of Jesus Christ.